A very good morning to you and welcome to the newspaper review reaching you live from our studios at Impact Television. I am Oyinpriye Krumale. We are currently being joined by Fred Nzeaka. Fred Nzeaka is a legal practitioner who joins us via phone call from Lagos. Good morning and welcome to the newspaper review, Barrister Fred.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you very much. Barrister Fred, the much-awaited Electoral Act Amendment Bill has been signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari, but we want to ask, what's new? What should Nigerians be expecting?
Well, it is gladdening that the bill has been signed and has become an act. At least we now have a brand new electoral act that will guide our future elections, especially the general elections of 2023. A few things are germane and a few things are new in that bill, which we believe will advance the course of our election hearing process.
Okay.
The most prominent one among them is the process of transmission of results, which has now been made law.
Okay.
To the effect that electronic transmission technology can now be deployed in transmitting election results. The gladdening part of it is that all those issues that happen in process of manipulation of results,
okay,
between the polling booths and the collation centers would have been cured by electronic transmission. And it does not only stop at that, it can be transmitted real-time online, such that people all over the world can be watching the results as they drop at the collation room.
Okay.
That is the most important aspect. The second one is that INEC has now been given the latitude, more so, in addition to authorities given to them by the Constitution, they have been given extra authority to deploy all modern technologies in carrying out their electoral management.
Okay.
The other interesting aspect is that there is now wider timelines in issues of when to conduct primary elections and the rest of them, in addition to the fact of the hot debate of whether it's going to be direct or indirect primaries that will be deployed for the primary elections. So these are some of the basic things and a lot more too, by the time you go through the new law, that we believe will enhance the course of our democratic experience.
Okay. Barrister Fred, earlier when the bill was sent to Mr. President to append his signature, that time, direct primaries was made as the mandatory means for conducting primary elections in political parties. But now we have both direct primaries, indirect primaries, and consensus. But from what we see in the polity from different political parties who are gearing up for the election that we present, the standard bearer of their political parties, they seem to be focusing more on the consensus mode of conducting and the standard bearer of their political parties. Do you think this will help the electoral process at the party level?
Yes, what the new law has done is to revert back to the status quo antebellum before the bill was ever tinkered with, because the Supreme Court had given judgment to the effect that political parties have the right and the authority to determine who flies their flag. Okay. And some people argue that in trying to compel parties to follow a definite approach in determining their flag bearer will be undemocratic, in which case it would have cut short the views of the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And what Mr. President has insisted on is that you should allow the political parties to determine how they choose their candidates, whether they decide to take it by direct or indirect or by consensus. And what is important is that the provisions of the Constitution of the parties are adhered with. It's only when parties fail to adhere to the provisions of their Constitution that's when an issue may arise. As it is, we have gone back to either you use the direct or indirect, or you use consensus.
Okay.
Whatever means or mode that any political party decides to use really does not disturb anybody.
All right. Let's move away from that. We also heard that in the new bill that has been signed into law has it that persons or ministers or commissioners at the state level or maybe other appointees or political office holders at the local government level, there is a time frame within which they are to resign their political positions, to declare the political appointments, to declare their intentions if they were to contest for elective offices. What's your take on that?
I think it's a very good one. It is not only at the local government level, all appointees of government at local, state, and federal. If you want to become a delegate to any party primaries or you want to run for an election, you should resign your position. The spirit of such provision is to ensure that people do not use government machinery and gain undue advantage in a political contest. Because if you allow them to remain in office and become delegates, they will manipulate government machinery and use it to their advantage.
Okay.
If you allow them to remain in office and run for election, they obviously will use government facilities to gain undue advantage over others, in which case they are no longer providing level playing fields for all contestants. So it is a provision that is very good, and it has a historical background. In 1999, in fact, before 1999, as far back as 1983, when Abubakar was the governor of Kano State and he wanted to run for a second term, he volunteered to resign from office. In fact, he did resign, and before he ran for a second term, handed over the reins of government to his deputy. And thereafter, by the time we came back to this Fourth Republic in 1999, it has always been provided that if you wanted to run for an election, you resign your appointive office.
Okay.
But governors and even the president at the federal level have been using this opportunity to bring in as many of the appointees as possible as delegates to be able to manipulate and control the results of party primaries and other things and go to their party machinery.
Okay.
So this law, this provision of the new act will ensure that level playing field is provided for all contestants.
Okay. Barrister Fred, also the thing about age in this electoral bill, there seems to be more silence on that aspect because if age is made known, that means there are some categories of people who might be able to declare or contest for the electoral office as president or governors or elective positions in the country. Do you have any idea what the age specification is?
No, they did not go. I don't think they went into the issue of age because that has already been provided in the Constitution. The Constitution has spelled out the age within which one is qualified to contest for any election, be that of legislature or executive. So they didn't bother to go there because that has already been taken care of by the Constitution. Going there will mean amending the Constitution itself, which is no longer the prerogative of only the National Assembly. Two-thirds of all the states in Nigeria will be involved, because all the gamut of amendment of provisions of the Constitution will be at play. So I think that has already been taken care of. Age is not the issue. The Constitution has made obvious provision about that. Okay.
Now let's move away from that, but still in connection with the elections for 2023 and subsequent elections. It has been said that the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. Well, it's also have a similar bearing when it comes to electioneering in Nigeria, because after elections, we see setting up of the election petition tribunal, after which it goes to the judiciary proper, when some people felt dissatisfied, if some people felt dissatisfied with the system. Now, the independence of INEC and the judiciary's intervention in electioneering in the country, how can you separate that and how can you bring that collaboratively in giving Nigerians an electoral process that is even more democratic?
In any democracy, the doctrine of separation of powers must be adhered to. not just strictly, but in practice. And that doctrine requires that the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary must be separated, even though they will work in synergy towards achieving good governance for the country. But in operational models, there must be separation of powers in democracy. That is the proposition of Baron Montesquieu, and which the world has adopted, especially in the presidential system of government. And even though INEC is an arm, so to speak, of the executive, the word independent requires that INEC must, as a matter of necessity, be allowed to operate without the control or the close apron, under the apron string of the executive. The only duty the executive has is to fund INEC and provide INEC with the necessary facilities to handle their assignment with respect to the provisions of the law. So that doctrine of separation and that doctrine of independence that is required from a electoral management body are the major ingredients of any democratic environment, because that ensures that the people are allowed by law and practice to decide their leaders and who governs them at any point and at any level of government. Okay. So, and the judiciary being the last hope of the common man, you will find out that by the end of the day, when there are contentious issues, not only in the electoral process, but any time there are contentious issues in the polity, the judiciary is always resorted to adjudicate and to ensure that justice is not only done, but seem to manifestly seem to have been done. So the judiciary needs to be separated from the antics of politics and from the issues of contestation in the political arena. And that is why the judiciary needs also to be independent in its operations and not be under the fetters of the executive nor the legislature. So the doctrine of separation of power is very, very apt, especially on the issues of judiciary.
Okay, Barrister Fred, when you talk about separation of power and independence, well, let's still beam the searchlight on INEC. INEC in this case, why the name independence? Why don't we have a situation where just the way the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature determine or collect their budget or their funding straight from the budget of the country? Why do we then have that of the Independent National Electoral Commission coming from the executive? Why not straight from the budget, the proposal that is being put in place by the executive as well, and have INEC to have the latitude to make proposition with regards to the amount they will need, and not solely on the authority of the executive arm, because it could be used as a tool for control?
Your logic is very germane and very, very understandable. It's a very reasonable logic. My only comment there is that this is an evolving democracy. I believe that at some point we will get there, because to ensure that INEC is fully independent, INEC should draw its own funding from the first line charge of the federation account. Okay. The same way the legislature, the executive, and judiciary draw their funds from the first line charge of the federation account. But I think that at this point we have not gotten there, and that is where we should be aiming at. Although the electoral management body INEC usually has some sympathizers from across the world, the ones that they call development partners, who often send money across to them to assist in funding the elections. But there is still this hand of the executive in the funding, because INEC draws its budget and sends it to the executive, and then it is included in the national budget for them to be funded. And then that funding comes from the executive. As a matter of fact, every funding in the real sense of it comes from the executive, because the central bank, which releases money to all tiers and arms of government, is controlled by the executive. Okay. The governor of central bank is an appointee of the president. And that is where that doctrine of separation of power, even though they are separate, but there are some bloodlines which they are separate, but they are not compartmentalized. Because compartmentalizing all the various tiers of government will mean that the smooth running of government will be affected and hampered. Okay. They must work in synergy to deliver good governance to the people. And in some cases, there must be tangential contact that will be made, and in some cases, full-blown contact that will be made. To a large extent, there is little or nothing one can do about it as human beings. But we will try as much as possible to give independence and autonomy to INEC by ensuring that they draw their funding from the first line charge of the Federation account. So the effect that neither the executive nor the judiciary nor the legislature will have a tampering effect on the funding of INEC. Okay. But of course, you know that funding alone does not make election. You also require other parties, other critical stakeholders which are controlled by other arms of government. For example, the security agencies. Okay. There are major stakeholders in election, and the security agencies are under the control of the executive. If the executive denies INEC the services of the security agencies, INEC will not be able to function in conduct of election. Okay. So as much as we want an independent body, we also want bodies that work in synergy to deliver the good governance to the people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barrister Fred. But before we draw the curtain with you, let's look at on the global platform. I'm sure you have been seeing what's happening between Russia and Ukraine and how this has affected the world in general. And the economy of Nigeria, too, has been affected, most especially when it comes to fuel and natural gas issues. Now, I just want you to paint a picture and a perspective of your impression regarding the global politics.
Well, what is happening between Russia and Ukraine is heart-aching. Heart-aching in the sense that for every bomb that drops, some human beings will possibly lose their lives. For every life lost in that war, it is very, very regrettable. And so we can use this medium to ask that the war be stopped, and then the countries should go down back to the negotiation table and ensure that further lives are not lost. As unfortunate as it is also important that the international community and the humanity in general should know that we do not have, as human beings, we do not have authority to take other people's lives unnecessarily and unduly. In wars, lives are lost, properties are gone, people suffer a lot, and that is what is going on now in Ukraine. It cannot be said to be a war. It is an aggression by Russia against Ukraine. For whatever reasons that they have, the world is saying such aggression must stop, and then let's go back to the negotiation table and ensure that further lives are not lost. Okay. On the economic side of it, for everything that the world is a global village. So for anything that is happening in one part of the globe, it is affecting other parts of the globe, either directly or indirectly. Now the war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine has affected the supply of energy, the supply of oil and gas to the world. And once there is a destabilization of the flow of supply of energy, it affects prices, it affects other relations among nations. Nigeria may be benefiting in one way or the other by way of price increase, but because Nigeria also is an importer of finished products, the benefit that they make from increase in price of petroleum and gas will be lost when they try to import finished products. Okay. So at the end of the day, if we had been a country with robust refineries in Nigeria and able to feed our consumption locally, then we can begin to say the benefit is positive. But as it is, the benefit is neither positive nor negative. Okay. Nigeria is at a flat point, and at a point, it may even become negative. Okay. And that is what we have been talking about internationalization of our economy and looking down on domestic productivity. Now we are seeing the net effect and the result. You may immediately find out that part of the fuel scarcity, the reasons for the fuel scarcity that we are seeing in all major cities and towns in Nigeria may be connected to the war going on in Ukraine and Russia.
Okay. Barrister Fred Nzeka is a legal practitioner. Thank you very much, Barrister Fred, for your time this morning on the Newspaper Review.
Many thanks.
Thank you. And as well as the Newspaper Review this morning, I am Priye Krumale. Many thanks for watching. You can send eyewitness report to info@highimpactstudios.com and direct messages on all our social media platforms at ImpactTV and ImpactTV UK.